Decentralization is the only possible path for our species. Tell us why.
At some point, everything gets a bit too centralized. So centralization is a very powerful force. It's
Stefano Bernardi, founder of Unruly Capital.
He is a visionary thinker and a 100x investor.
He believes decentralization is the only path forward for our species.
We really try to see what is next, be there very early, and find the things that are really going to drive the world forward.
no one has a solid idea how to get out of this system.
Hey, Stefano, what's going on, my man?
Hey, all good. What about you?
Living the dream one day at a time. Just trying to do good work, So listen, obviously the entire premise behind going direct is about decentralizing the real economy and talking to builders and people that are building technologies to decentralize the real economy. You wrote an entire investment thesis around the decentralization of the real world.
We do.
So I don't think we need to talk. I don't think I need to say anything more than that, other than a shout out to Alex Gample for sending me the manifesto, being like, you need to talk to Stefano. So thank you, Alex.
Alex is awesome.
Cool. All right, so let's start with this. I'm gonna pull out different sections from the thesis because I think there's a lot of great points here to dig into, especially for many folks that, for you and I who think about this stuff a lot, it's very natural. But for many folks, it's a little bit abstract, I think. So you state this one line that I resonate highly with: decentralization is the only possible path for our species. Tell us why.
Well, so you picked the heavy line, right?
Hey, listen, man, we got to unpack it.
And yeah, we like to write it, very direct. But at some point, institution, markets, models, companies, everything gets a bit too centralized. So centralization is a very powerful force. It's natural. It has its many, many advantages. It just gets to sometimes a specific point where it can't really bring us towards a better pastures, let's say, right? So at some point, it just becomes too big and it can't innovate anymore. And the incentives especially get all twisted up, right? The incentives just don't work anymore. And so then it's when you have to decentralize, and it will eventually happen, because when something gets too big, either it implodes or it explodes. But the end state is that there will be many new things popping up, right? And so for us, we're just realizing now and sort of like trying to put out there that there's a few things that have gotten way too centralized, and if we want to have like a say in the future, and we want to really bring it forward, we can just start to decentralize right now different parts of the economy, of the political system, of the financial system, potentially of the food system, and definitely of the manufacturing system.
Cool. And you also frame, the history as this pendulum of swinging back from centralization to decentralization. So like in your mind, like what causes those swings? Is it really related to technologies, or is it, like you said, it's just a systems thing where things become so centralized is a sclerotic that new things pop up that are just better?
Yeah, I realized late that I would have really loved to have majored in history, sadly. So I did not, and so I'm a very amateur historian. But yeah, the current, interpretation that I have is just systems. As I was saying earlier, centralization is a natural thing. It has its efficiencies, its economies of scale. You get to have better coordination costs, and you can just do better stuff. But again, at some point, it gets too big. And so it's not obviously, something that we just came up with the ideas. It's just looking back. You see the big empires, at some point, they get too big. They decentralize. They get greedy. They get too big. The coordination costs start to creep up. And then it's impossible to manage, right? And so yeah, that's just a general observation of history. And then I think, the hard thing is going to be, okay, where are we in that cycle? Where are we in that cycle? And then do we have a little say or not into when that moment of decentralization comes? Or is it just, like purely a big chaos theory, systems theory? And then we just have to, as investment, just kind of like try to predict when the right time is. I think we do have a little say, but at the same time, if it's not the right time in history, it's going to be very hard to actually change things.
I think that's a good segue into you described reading the Bitcoin white paper in 2009 as a real kind of transformative moment for you. And I think that was good. It's kind of relevant for, you said, when we're ready for more decentralization. So kind of just talk to me about why most people have not read the white paper. So maybe why and why it was so transformative in how you looked at the world.
Yeah, I think, I had a little prepared mind. I was very interested before that came out, into community currencies and alternative currencies. So I was just, reading a lot about just how the financial systems worked. And I think that is probably the easiest example of something that's gotten too centralized and too big. And so, it's a ripe time. And the Bitcoin white paper really stems from that. It stems from a system that doesn't work anymore, where it's completely centrally controlled, and that has gotten too big. And there's no way out. Like, the only way is to print more money, issue more debt. Like, honestly, it's been like 15 years looking at. No one has a solid idea how to get out of this system, right? And so it's all like micro optimizations of like, how can we get it, another 5 years, another 10 years. But if you project it long enough, sort of no one will be able to give you a good explanation for how that becomes sustainable, and we bring it back in check, right? And so the Bitcoin white paper to me was, the thing is like, okay, this is not someone, just doom saying is like, okay, we're all fucked, like this sucks and everything. This was a proper new idea, even though obviously it was, not derivative, but like it was building upon a number of other ideas, both on the, let's call it like the social side and the technological side. But this was someone that was doing something. It's like, okay, like I had an idea and then I've implemented it, and now, go have fun. Like, here you go. So that it was transformative in that sense, because it's kind of like, you can just do things. And that was someone just doing something about it, and showing a better way. But, if you project history 500 years out, I think, they'll read about that moment in history books.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. It's obviously it seems like we're in a very transformative moment in history right now. Just feels that way. But I know it's been, we've had kind of ebbs and flows, but I think there's some areas that are going to start tipping, which is going to be fun to watch and be a part of. I want to go back to something that at the beginning, when back to this line about the only possible path for our species. And so I want to make sure we hit on this, because I know it's an important piece for you, and it's an important piece for me also. That kind of alludes to something around the environment and sustainability. So kind of let's just talk me through that kind of component of your thinking.
Yeah, because obviously, I mean, there's the social, political, financial component, but then, it's not a direct threat to the species, unless obviously it becomes total nuclear warfare, and then
nothing else matters at that
right,
point.
like then obviously, like, that is a civilization ending aspect. But yeah, the reality is around resource usage and management, right? So obviously, technology there will, even in a centralized manner, will advance substantially, where we can overcome a whole number of limits, of restrictions that are based on resources, scarcity, availability, and everything. We will be able to mine asteroids. We'll be able to mine the moon. We'll be able to reuse a lot of the things on the Earth. But, even fossil fuels at some point will end. And our economy is not built to run solely on renewables. It could be built to be run solely on nuclear potentially, but still, we'll need natural gas for some stuff. We'll need coal for some other stuff, and we'll definitely need a lot of crude for materials things. And so I think that specific phrasing there is really related to resource reuse and local production of items, right? And so kind of not having different pieces of the economy really tied to just one specific miner or manufacturer in some remote region of China that everybody depends on. It's kind of a bit of a fragile situation to have, and you never know what the big consequences of that are, right? Again, that's a bit hyperbole, a bit like strong of a wording, but I do think that in the future we will really like pay more attention to that, and we're seeing it with companies that we invest in now, like every day. Everybody's like, we're running out of this. This is too centralized in some other place in Angola or something, and this just does not work for a lot of people. Plus, the demand is exploding. Obviously, we're bringing more and more people out of poverty every single day. Everybody will want new resources, will want energy and things like that, and so we need to figure out alternative ways, and I think that we do those in a very decentralized fashion.
Got it. So you've largely been, you've been around decentralization for the past, 15 plus years, with crypto and the digital world. And, doing this in the real world is much harder to pull off for many reasons. Some obvious, some less obvious. But like, as an early stage venture investor, why do you believe this can be done? Like from a perspective of someone investing based upon, how you construct your portfolio and how you think about, the risk return profiles.
It's just the founders that show us. So we never really kind of build thesis or pretend that we're smarter than everyone else or things like that. It's really an observation game in a sense, right? And then we're just lucky to have a prepared mind because, having spent a lot of mental cycles thinking about decentralization, we can maybe piece together a couple of points. But we were just seeing on the market founders telling us about their decentralized solutions and how they were better, how they needed less resources, how they were more resilient, more anti-fragile, and then more and more cheaper, right? So to us, it's really just an observation. And then if you sit and you want to be all intellectual about it, you can run those mental cycles. You can figure out exactly what's happening. And obviously, there are a number of things that are happening now that make it possible, right? Electrification in general makes this possible because then with batteries, this changes completely the game. With batteries and renewables, so you can have self-sustaining things that are just solar plus battery plus whatever industrial process you want to attach to that, right? And you can put that in a field somewhere and it can run forever. You never have to go refuel it, or something, right? And you don't have to attach it to a natural gas pipe. And at the same time, I think one of the latest, but even potentially more important things to happen is just what's happening in generative AI and assisted AI. And so now, so you have the energy component, but now you also have the design component. And I think that was really limiting what was possible in decentralization, right? Because the benefits of centralization is you design once, and so you can spend a whole lot of money on designing something, and then you produce it all centralized, and that's going to cost not that much money. But now, if the design costs of some industrial piece or whatever other thing tends to zero, then you can just produce one-offs and everything can be personalized and it can be produced anywhere in the world, right? And so there's this number of things that are happening at the same time. Obviously, better computation, so you can run computing at the edge, energy and renewables and batteries, so you can power stuff around the world. But then the real key game changer here, I think, will be Gen AI, and that will make the kind of like 3D printed revolution really happen. And without that, there would have been no way, right? Because I oftentimes think about buying a 3D printer to my kids, but they don't know how to use a CAD software, and neither do I, and so I would have to spend the time there. But now, you just put into ChatGPT or any of the other CAD AI things that are popping up every single week, and then you can print whatever you want. And you're not just kind of like browsing on the markets for pieces. You can just show it a picture of something that broke and say, hey, like design me a 3D model of this that's more solid. Change this, change that, and then off you go, right? So it's really like in the real world, obviously harder, but I think we're at this unique point in time where there's all these kind of like little and big things happening that make it really, really doable.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. You- I got on this like the really decentralization journey probably about I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, and it really started with biomanufacturing and synthetic biology.
Yeah.
And it's interesting kind of what I realized in my interest in this, because originally it was very kind of biomanufacturing focused, especially in the industrial biotech side. But kind of what you're saying, which I agree, which I obviously I'm going to agree with, is a little confirmation bias, but I totally agree. It's like you have all of these things kind of coming together, right? So like when you think about like more decentralized clean systems of production, I would put like, I would put circular economy / upcycling, biomanufacturing, 3D printing, and then just the decentralized, like just more automated IoT connected devices.
Yeah.
And I, I, it's interesting your perspective on the design side, because I just don't have the insight into that from an investment standpoint as much. But I completely agree.
Design and computing really is what's changing everything, right?
Totally.
Because we're seeing it. We're looking at companies that are printing Invisalign, dental stuff, and they're just selling a machine to the doctors, to the dentists, and you can just print it there instead of having to send it somewhere else. And then we're seeing cell factories being sold to doctors, whereas previously, you would need to send and wait and send your tissue samples or blood samples, and it would take like months and travel and all. And now you can just build a little machine that has a lot of computation, that has AI models in it, and then it just spits out the cells. And we're seeing it a lot in the bio space. It's really all happening at the same time. It's quite wild to see, both on that end as well as like consumer product manufacturing and industrial manufacturing. We have companies that supply some very large companies that you would very well know and potentially use the products every day, that sell their machines to those companies, and they're using it in production. So I'm sure that you have something around there that has something that's actually 3D printed and not injection molded, in production, with some aluminum replacement parts made of super composites and stuff like that. Because then the innovation in material science is also an enabling factor here, something that is probably pushed by that, but it's also happening at the same time. And so we have incredible new materials that people are coming up with every day. And this all happened in an era when we didn't have foundation models for material designs. So what's going to happen in the next 10 years is unimaginable on the materials sciences stuff as well.
So I'm just a random question on the 3D printing side. So obviously it's been kind of this holy grail for the past 15, 20 years, and it's never really arrived. I mean, it's pretty pervasive, like you said, in many ways that people don't realize, but still, like, they thought it was going to be this revolution. And so do you really think it really is the critical piece, though, out of all of the technologies, is that kind of design, is like the design piece?
Many different critical pieces,
Okay.
right? Because there, even with design stuff, it just was not working. Stuff was like flimsy, it would take forever, the machines would clog, like all that stuff. But like everything, it's extremely overhyped in the short term and extremely underhyped in the long term. And I think we've passed the overhyped part in the short term, and now even just with a regression to the mean, we'll be fine. But it will actually. I know plenty of companies that use it in production, and I think there's no one that doesn't use it for prototyping. And there's this like big ass machines that can print whatever, and there's 3D metal printing, and there's new kind of like light based, resin based things that are absolutely insane. And so yeah, I think it's undeniable that now it is happening, and pervasive.
All right, moving over. We're going to move over to food a little bit. So I'm a big. So as an American married to a French woman, I come. I'm from a place where we poison ourselves and we poison our kids, to the place that probably takes food the most serious, like at a deep societal level. So you had this saying, you mentioned Fiat food is over. What do you mean by that?
Well, Fiat food is a very controversial topic in a sense, right? And it is just the pervasive kind of modification of the food system at the hands of the financial system. And so, the fact that now there's like corn into every single thing that you eat, basically, that you cannot avoid it, it's not because it's better or we need it or anything. It's just because of subsidies and how the markets were structured, right? And so that has completely changed the stuff that's on people's tables. And it's all like a centralized kind of direction from the top, and how financial markets and economical markets in the US are made, and how Mexican tortillas are made with US corn because it's so cheap, because they don't know what to do with it because of the incentives. Anyways, like there's a few books on that topic that are really, really interesting. I'll try to remember the names later of the ones that have chapters on that, and you can put them in the notes. But the point is, like, we're not really now, the market is not in control of what we eat. It's the subsidies. And so that's fiat food, essentially. It's like we're not making the decisions ourselves. It's someone else that's just like printing money and deciding where to put it. And that has like very real consequences on the plates that you have on the table, and then obviously on the composition of your body, right? So, but decentralization in food is, like, food's always been decentralized. Like you would eat
Totally.
whatever was growing here or whatever was running in the forest close to you. And then now that's not the case anymore. Obviously, we eat stuff that's made all over the world by massive, massive centralized corporations. And sometimes it's awesome because, we would never have bananas, like no part of the year. And but at some point it gets a bit too much, and everything gets distorted, right? So food is probably, the one that's a little bit harder to really think about and understand. But, you can really project yourself to a future where you have rooftop farms, vertical farms, everything's made close, everything's made fresh, everything's made to order. Obviously, cellular agriculture, alternative proteins will play a path into that. But it's also like hard to, and you very fast get into the debate between, like the absolute purists of food that needs to be, organic, regenerative, and perfect, with instead the part of the population that says, okay, but we're going to be 10 billion soon, and everybody has right to have proteins and good stuff, and we're not going to be able to have only organic stuff for everyone, right? That's from that very specific region in the north of France, and a local specialty, right? So we will need vertical farms, we will need rooftop farms, we will need alternative proteins, and we will need cellular agriculture. So I think that is going to happen, longer timelines, and quite a little bit more delicate to touch on in terms of like ethical concerns and philosophical concerns.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation a month or two ago with, I think you'll find this interesting. It's an American company, and it's called One Mighty Mill. John, the founder, and his team are amazing, but he was telling me, so they're building decentralized stone mills in the US. Obviously, as a European, it's table stakes to have good stone milled flour.
Yeah.
But this is crazy, man. So in 1900, there were 25,000 stone mills in the US, cornerstone of local food systems, right? Now there's less than 200. And basically 5 flour companies just completely control the market. And obviously it's largely industrialized flour that's just like no nutrients for the body. That's why everyone's like, when I come to Europe, I can eat as much bread and pasta as I want and I don't feel bloated.
No, we just got shipments of, I think, Canadian wheat, and people went there to just absolutely protest that stuff is getting here into the market. But stuff is getting so cheap over there that even in Italy they're importing grains. They're importing grains from Arkansas or something. I don't know, but it's not all locally made anymore. And that's just the distortions that happen from political scheming into the markets, because it's not just the markets.
Totally. And then and then there's this weird dichotomy, right? Like we're very privileged in the West, right? Where it's more, maybe it's a US thing, but it's everywhere, man. Like we're just so overfed, which is what just makes it so weird, right? You have this growing global population. How do we get basic protein to like many parts of the world? But then you're sitting there, I walk down my street and I'm like, there's just endless food.
Yes.
It's just a weird thing, man.
It is, and it's a distribution problem, obviously, and it's an intensive problem, and I don't know enough about that to say anything smart.
All right, I'm gonna do it. I have to repeat a dense quote from you. Okay.
Ouch. Let's see.
Yeah, I know. We got to get into it.
It's been a few years, so I haven't reread it in recent
No,
time.
this is easy. This is all second nature for you. Come on. But this is like an interesting one for me because I found myself investing in water and other public utility stuff that's like more public utilities, and it just all made sense to me. So you have this quote. Sorry, it's gonna be a little bit long, but stick with us. Advancing technology may allow decentralized, privatized, and free market solutions for what have been public services, such as utilities producing and delivering power, water, mail, telecommunications, and services like consumer product safety, money and banking, medical licensing, and detection and metering technologies for highways, parking, and auto emissions. The shift here is very hard for many to comprehend, imagine, and accept. So talk to me about, I don't know. You can go in any direction you want with it. Just, I was like that really hit me hard. So in a good way.
Again, I mean, it's hard to talk about this stuff, right? But if you do project out long enough and you assume that the centralized system that we're living in is going to come to an end, all empires have come to an end. Those things that are cited in that quote are usually the things that break down first, right? And so when the state is not strong enough and it can't pay anymore, post office, like utilities, water, like all that stuff is going to break, right? And who's going to suffer is the people that now assume that thing just falls from the sky for free, and it requires no maintenance, no infrastructure, no work, no nothing. But it's not true. It requires all of that, and then it requires money, and it requires therefore incentives that work. If the state's no longer there to provide that, who's going to do it? And so the hope there is that we will have developed financial and technological solutions to provide this basic needs to the population in an extremely cheap manner, and or for free, but then obviously you have to figure out where the money comes from, right? So again, like that is a super, super long-term thing. There's obviously a lot of people that are, hardcore libertarians that would want that to happen like today, and with the state not making any of those decisions and have competition for most things. But on things like the electrical grid, that's a little hard, right? Because there needs to be one company that owns the grid, not the whole grid, obviously, but like a piece of the grid. And even though we invested in a company that does like fully wireless energy, long distance, so maybe there will be no grid anymore in the future. and maybe everybody will be fully sovereign on their energy needs with completely decentralized energy systems. Possible, but water, sewage, much more complicated to sort out, right? Sewage probably doable, but fresh water, even. I mean, there's plenty of companies now that are making fresh water from the air, just from water vapor in the air. So I mean, it's impossible, obviously, to know what will happen in the future, but the technologies are happening and are doing that stuff, So yeah, that was a bit of the context for that. Again, long term, controversial, and probably requires a couple hours of friendly talks with a beer in hand.
All right, let's move on to robotics and automation. So let me frame this up. Obviously, robotics automation, especially in the West, is what's going to enable a lot of this. A lot of it, obviously, driven by generative AI, physical AI. But one of the things that we saw in the promise of the internet was true decentralization, right? And so it has done some of that. But at the end of the day, the companies that dominate the internet are largely centralized.
Very, very centralized.
Very centralized, right? So in your mind, like for me, what I think about a lot is on one end, it's going to enable this, and what I get really excited about that, but also like, couldn't it just reinforce centralization instead?
It could, for sure. Obviously, but that's the nature of it, right? And the reason that we have had such amazing products like Google, like all the other ones, is because it was a decentralized playing field to begin with, right? And so then you get the big centralized entities, and then they get too big, and then you'll get small decentralized entities that play, right? So I don't see it as that big of a problem. I think it's just a normal cycle of things. Innovation happens at the very, very decentralized stages, and then it just continues, and then the process of bringing it to everyone in the world is also a very important process. And if centralization is the better process to scale what has sort of like emerged as the better possible solution while in a decentralized market nature, then that's fine. There will always be something new to create and invent, right? So I'm not too worried about that. Obviously, you can worry about a lot of things, right? Especially in robotics and AI, about large centralized entity controlled by the state to issue police state and use those new tools as the enforcement agents of that. And I think we will see that at some point. It's very scary thoughts, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. Like there's very little chances it doesn't.
Yeah, man, it's weird. And some end, it's exciting, and then a little you can see the dystopian side, even the recent like the recent orb rollout, right, in San Francisco, and you're like, it makes a lot of sense, but it's also kind of like the more technology that we use, the less of our individual freedom you give up, and just because everything's tracked. It's like an interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's a tension, and again, I don't think there's an end to it. I have some friends who are extremely paranoid, and they like they don't put their address anywhere. They scrap all the pictures from the internet, and I don't even know where they live, and stuff like that. Everybody needs to figure out the trade-offs that they're comfortable making. It's a purely individual decision. You're sort of free to move around the world to wherever you want. I mean, not that much, but you can figure out if you don't like a police state somewhere, you can probably try and move out to somewhere else that's less technologically advanced and more free. But there's not that many places like that, and I don't think there will be for a while.
Where do you land on it personally?
I have a hard time. I go back and forth. It's very hard. Yeah.
Do you have extreme views on anything? Like one way or the other?
Yeah, all the time. It's just that I move from one extreme to the next, and then somehow land in the middle at the end. But I definitely start on one extreme for sure.
I get it. All right, so let's move over to Unruly, okay? So maybe just a quick rundown of what Unruly does for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, Unruly is a small 25 million boutique VC firm, and we invest in what's crazy today and normal tomorrow. So, and we do a lot of investments. So our fund one will have around 70 investments in there. And we can't really tell when we begin what we will actually invest in. So it's not a vertical firm. We know that we're future tech, stuff that's coming next. Tends to be a lot of deep tech things, but we do have a few software things, and I'm sure we're actually looking now at a couple of very, very normally things, but the concept of them, like people are like, okay, that's crazy. When someone says that, then we get very, very excited. We do small pre-seed rounds and seed rounds. We invest from 250K until we can push that up when there's space in it.
Great. I saw a note from you, which I also appreciated, that you have you've had a lifelong discomfort with non-earned authority.
Yeah.
And so how has that shaped your investment philosophy and the kind of founders you back?
It is this. Actually, it's a good question because it's shaped a lot of things. I don't know how it's shaped the investing. It's definitely shaped me getting into investing and just playing in the market where you usually earn your authority, or at least in the venture market. I think it's fairly meritocratic. Like the people at the very top, sometimes they say dumb shit and sometimes they do dumb shit, but the vast majority of people there are extremely intelligent, high agency, effective. They're all outliers and they're there for a reason. Obviously it's a bit centralized. It's been a bit centralized in Silicon Valley, and so if you're there you have much higher chances, but it's not kind of like a state or a political thing or even like universities or things like that where you very well know that the people at the top, they're not exceptional, and maybe you're better than them, but you're never going to get that position because the system is built in that way, or there's lobbies that control things, and so that's definitely why I'm playing into this market. In terms of how it's shaped the investments, I think it's just like it enables you to believe that somebody can do something quite exceptional, right? And that even coming from nothing. So we invest in a ton of first time founders with very different and weird backgrounds, and that's never kind of an issue of like, oh, you don't have this position, or like the path is not really the traditional path. But other than that, yeah, I think it doesn't shape the investment decisions too much. It's not like we only invest into subversive technologies or anything like that, right? But it makes me comfortable only in this kind of domain and much less in other places like politics or academia, for sure.
Great. So the firm's is based in Europe. Give us a sense of kind of just general breakdown of investing, across, maybe US, Europe, rest of the world.
Yeah, so I mean, anyone that goes to unrulycap.com can see everything real time updated. How many investments we've made in which countries and how much we invest into every single company. UK is number one, and then US is right after that. We've done a lot more US investments over the past year. We have then everything else is spread out through the rest of Europe: France, Germany, Nordics, couple here in Italy, and then we have 3 or 4 in Africa as well, where decentralized solutions are actually, like, all of them are decentralized
Yeah,
solutions.
it's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Interesting. And because they didn't have the time to centralize, right? So that's how it will be born. There's no infrastructure, and that's really like the only solution. So yeah, that's pretty much the spread. In terms of sectors, we literally do a bit of everything. So we have a lot of deep tech energy stuff, a lot of obviously decentralized energy plays, and I mean renewables are by nature decentralized. But we also have a company that creates natural gas in a fully decentralized way, so you don't have to go to Russia or someone else to buy your energy. We have some cellular agriculture things, some alternative protein things on the food stuff, more and more medical and biotech things, both decentralized and let's call them like standard. Fusion and food enzymes. We span the whole thing. In space manufacturing, bit of everything.
So I have personally found the this just the whole ecosystem, culture, the rules on the playing field very, very different in Europe than the US. And, you know, anyone that's built anything from scratch knows how hard it is to even make it work. And then layering on top rules, bureaucracy, regulations. Europe seems to be a very, very difficult place to, especially, and so how do you think about Europe versus US? And there's obviously constant debates. And for me, anyways, I have my own view on it, but I want to get your view.
It is. I mean, for us, it's just we're here, and so the founder talent density is pretty much the same around the world. And so we do happen to meet a lot of exceptional founders, and we back them. We do obviously think about what company they're trying to build in what environment, and we know they have a little bit of a drag because of that. A lot of them move to the US, but you can do it here. I mean, many people have built large unicorns over here. You just need to be aware and be able to navigate it. But it's doable. It's always getting better. There's more capital. There's more expertise. There's more people that have done it before. So more kind of like proper, not shortcuts, but like best practices or things like that people now know. And you just take that as a little bit of a cost of doing business, as you do in the US. I mean, in the US, that like legal is a cost of doing business that's, maybe like, I don't know, 20 times the cost that it's here on every small matter. There's that, and every place has its pros and cons. But I think Europe has, and the UK especially, I mean, has grown up substantially in terms of a startup market over the past years. And when we do investments out of the UK and the US, then we think it through a couple times more, let's say.
Is there something that when you think about UK or Europe, like where, how that this region can build differently, or where you think there might even be a leg up over the US market? Is there any like areas that you get really excited about from a differentiation standpoint or density of talent?
I think it always relates to founder quality, and obviously, the UK with the kind of London, Oxford, Cambridge axis has just some outstanding people that pop out of there. And that really is always the advantage, right? And I think the US has always had the advantage there with all of the higher education institutions just being completely out of the league of anyone else, right? Both in terms of professors, academia, like what you get taught, the networks that you build. Now that's starting to really show up also in the UK and other places. I mean, for example, top robotics companies in the world, I would say, other than China, but ex-China top robotic companies, they're all going to come out of Zurich. The ecosystem there with the ATH and the faculty that's there is just churning out awesome people all the time. So when you get these clusters, people do centralize around them, and they just work.
What specifically in Zurich is going on the robotics side that gets you so excited in ETH? Like,
we just see all the top people, and they're all from there, right? So then again, it's an observation from the outcomes and not from the reasons. Then you can go look at it. I think there's forget the name, there's a professor there that built a massive robotics company, sold to Amazon, and then started taking up the faculty there, and I think he single-handedly
that's great.
just changed the dynamics of the region, for sure. But usually, yeah, it's like a few people that are exceptional that decide to spend the time somewhere, and then people magnetically gravitate towards that. And you don't need that many, like 2-3 exceptional people, and then that are happy to engage, talk to young people. That's usually enough.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I found that, I'm from Detroit originally and spent a decade there building actually a real estate company, commercial real estate company. And I always said the same exact thing, where it was like we had such a dearth of mentors and people that had done it. And like willing to not only willing to spend time, but saying like, hey, I want to bring the next generation up, and I want to make the pie bigger with them. It was very much like there's this pie, and I want the pie for myself because I never had an opportunity to get that pie as the city started to make a comeback.
Yeah. I mean, and scarcity breeds that a little bit, right?
Totally.
Obviously, you do need a bit of an abundance to start with to be comfortable with that, right? And Italy is the same, and a few of the other European countries are the same. But yeah, it's starting.
The you mentioned earlier, or just a little while ago, about you have all the specifics of Unruly and the investments you've made and the amounts, and so you call it this maximum transparency, dashboard.
Mhm. Yeah.
Just talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that's like really, I think it shows a lot about kind of how you're trying to approach the space that's large, VC space that's largely opaque, and kind of the knock against it is it's kind of a, you know, like a closed door club, old boys club, and to get into, and especially from a deal flow standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, it was, right? Like now there's so much content online and you can really know almost a bit of everything. And plus, all the deal book and all the crunch bases of the world, which give you unparalleled insight that, 15 years ago would have been unheard of. For us, it's just a way that a couple of things. We always like to do something a little bit different than everyone else, and everybody, when we were taking inspiration for our website to give to the agency, everybody had the same websites, and we were like, okay, which website are we looking at? Everybody's investing in amazing founders, building big companies in large markets, and defining the whatever, right? It's always the same bullshit. And so, because again, we all do the same stuff, right? So it's fair. Like everybody will have the same. It's like a plumbing company. What the fuck do you do? Like, yeah, we'll do your HVAC and a couple other things. So no one had something like that. And that's stuff that everybody asks us all the time anyways during calls. It's like, okay, how big's your fund? How much have you invested? Which companies did you invest in? Like, how many investments did you make in the last quarter? Like the top founders will ask that stuff because they want to know how much, like where to put you in the bucket, how active you are, like check sizes and stuff like that. Plus what you like, what you don't like. And for us, it's just more useful to have it out than not. So we really didn't see any drawbacks to that. And then, we don't put the valuation. We put the average valuation that we get, but we didn't put the single valuations because obviously that's a sensitive. Not for us. Like we would. I don't care. But for each company, it's a sensitive piece of info. And as for me, I would put everything, even the follow-on rounds and like how much we get diluted and all that kind of stuff. But we'll do that as aggregates because we don't want to obviously put out data that for other investors and founders is not cool. But yeah, like no downsides. Everybody loves it. So yeah, it's great.
If you could, if we're sitting here in 15, 20 years, if there's one decentralized system, it could be physical or digital, that you really hope will be fully kind of realized, is there one that kind of stands out for you?
It's a good question. I think I want it all. Like I
Me
want
too.
the things that have like full living cities that are completely autonomous, that have the energy, the water, the food, the medical services, the parts to be, like that recycle all the materials that get used, like all the trash that gets recycled and 3D printed into new thing. I think if we just get one, it's kind of like, you know, not that big of a deal. But yeah, energy and water will probably be the big topics. But to me, really, like the interesting vision is if you combine everything into that.
Yeah, it was funny. I had a conversation. Do you know Ian over at Cantos?
Yeah, sure.
So it was funny. We had a conversation, and he was like, "Yeah, it's like I've been thinking about this because we're always seeing these different components, different decentralized technologies. Like, man, what if we just put them all together and just build a city?"
Yeah,
You know?
I mean, like that's when it gets interesting, right? The work is just getting the various pieces to work, and some things, will be like water. There are many places that will face water shortages and challenges, and so other than clean air, water comes right after it, right? So probably, yeah, the more practical answer would be clean water anywhere at any time. But yeah, the big vision is the interesting.
I find it so fascinating that more people don't pay attention to the water piece. There's with all this, all this energy around environments, more sustainable practices, and it is very fascinating to me that there's not more focus on it because I agree with what you're saying.
It's like the supermarket's full of water. You open the tap, water comes out. You don't think about it.
Totally.
You don't think where it comes from. I think, more rural regions will think about it, or people that come from, like long lines of rural families that, the drought have had issues on them. But like people that live in cities are completely insulated from all of that stuff.
Yeah, actually, the pod we just put up last week was actually on this exact topic: the decentralization of water treatment for drinking water.
Yeah, I have a few guests for you. You should talk to Brian and Aquaria and a few others.
Cool. Well, when we're wrapping up, I'll get a couple names from you.
Nice.
Why are you doing this work?
It's fun, intellectually stimulating, and I think it. I won't be ashamed of it when I'm on the deathbed, right? So equal parts of all. It's also profitable if done well. So it really has it all. It has it all to me. But yeah, the intellectual stimulation is a big piece. The idealistic component, they're all the same. I wouldn't do if any of the pieces would be missing. Let's say. So I don't want to say, I'm this kind of like idealistic battle, and like I'm an evangelist, missionary. No, I just happen to think that it has all four parts, and so that.
And just talk a little bit how you ended up at on the background to what led you to Unruly, because we didn't really talk much about that.
Yeah, I mean, I always knew I wanted to do venture, weirdly enough. So I was doing computer engineering, but I was already making money online, building like scripts for MySpace and stuff like that. So I knew I was not gonna kind of like get a normal job. And then I read about venture. I knew I wanted to do that. And so my first job was in venture. Then I wanted to get operating experience on the startup side. So joined startups, did my own, did YC. I didn't have the focus needed to run a startup. I need to think about many, many different things at the same time. And so then I raised a small fund. Then I made some money with some investments. I started angel investing. And then it took a while to be able to sort of like put it together into something that makes sense, or at least to me, as something that invests not in a vertical, invests in a lot of companies, doesn't really know what it's going to invest in over the next few years. So it's kind of like a bit weird, but at some point I wanted to do like just a decentralized fund, not itself being decentralized, but investing in decentralization was hard to put together, kind of DeFi, food and energy. And so this is the vehicle where I can do that. It's like it's a full-on venture fund, but many different companies and no specific vertical. And then we run these, from time to time, specific theses. Right now we have this one. We also have one on sugar, and we have one on robotic services, and I'm sure we'll have ones on different stuff in the coming years.
Great. All right. So kind of last, as we're wrapping up here, a little rapid fire for you. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Can I give us one name of a person whose work you follow, or it can be anything on the personal side? So does it really had an impact on you, either personally or professionally?
I mean, too many to list. Ooh, not very rapid fire here is going to be about that.
Take your time. Just who comes to mind?
Yeah. Look, there's too many. I think, I will say obviously Satoshi and Vitalik, for sure, completely changing the game on how all people in the world think about decentralized computing systems, because there was already a lot of decentralization happening, and generally kind of enabling the revolution, let's say.
Cool. And last podcast you listened to
I listened
or recent,
to. So I don't have a very good brand stickiness. So I actually don't know, but it was one on Chinese technology, and I will never remember the name. I
I'll put it in the
apologize
notes
for
way
that.
after. Forget
Yeah,
it was no big deal.
but I just stumble on stuff randomly, and I depend a bit on the YouTube algorithm for that. Oh, yeah.
Who else should I have a conversation with?
I think
Some of these things?
Brian from Aquaria would be good. You know, decentralized water is not something that is immediate to think about, right?
Sure.
It's like there's a spring in the mountain, like water comes out. So I didn't invest. Big mistake. We had co-invested in other stuff there. I think that would be one that makes sense.
Great. How can people reach you?
Stefano at unrulycap.com, or Twitter or LinkedIn, or it's easy to these days.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll include that in the show notes. Listen, man, I appreciate your time, and no, it was fun, and obviously for me, it's a little more confirmation bias. I'm like, man, I met someone who I've been thinking about this for a long time, and it took me a while to arrive, similar to you, with going
Yeah.
direct. So it's fun to
No,
have the
it's good.
conversation.
It's good. We were just waiting till many more people show up.
They'll come. They're coming.
Indeed.
All right,
Thanks for
Stefano.
doing this. I think I should have done this. I don't have the time. It's really, really great to see that someone who understands it, gets it, spends the time to evangelize. So thanks for that.
Hey, we'll just do more. It's the same. It's all the same stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, man.
Thanks.
See ya.